Civil War era, but
Yeah.
they're looking on my.
All right. All right, the entertainment on the front row has started. Okay. All right, so we're going to do Lab 7 today. Again, as I was saying earlier, as I got here, those of you that sent me questions about the project that was due last night at midnight on the day it was due, it's a little late to ask me how to open the files and get the file structure running at that point. I don't give you 2 weeks to do a project because I think you can do it the day it's due. I also, again, in my syllabus, it says that I don't answer questions 24 hours before it's due. Sorry. It's a little late at that point. Okay, I've been told to stop apologizing and to set my boundaries. I'm not good at that. I'm not good at setting boundaries.
Hashtag please.
I am such a people pleaser. I did really good though. I did not take sob stories on this one. So we are going to do Lab 7. If you notice, there's a Lab 7 starter file in the content page, which, if I'm not mistaken, should be this piece of code that it tells you to copy and paste. Let's see. Let's download it and see. Is it not?
It's like past that, yeah.
It's past
It's
that?
already modified.
Okay, well, I gave you more than you had to have. Are you really going to complain about me giving you more than you needed?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely not. Absolutely. Absolutely not.
So if you get the starter file, it's going to have done quite a bit of what it wants you to do for, that was not what I wanted to do. I have a really bad headache today, so if I do stupid things, just point out that I've done something stupid. All right, so let's get this big enough where we can read it. All right, so this right here is the modified version of this code, right? So I'm going to talk about what this code would look like, and you can modify it if you want to, or you could just start with the already modified code. I don't care. This is a lab. It's one of those things that I pretty much give you credit for doing it unless you just doesn't work. So if you're reading through this, it tells you to copy and paste, define count. I called it count letters over here. But it's pretty much starts off having you count the letters in a quote. Now, if you need a quote to actually show up with all of its little punctuation and the quote marks and stuff in it, use 3 quotation marks around it. Does that make sense? So right here, there's 3 single quotes. Yes. Make it bigger where y'all can see it. And then it ends with 3 single quotes. What that does, that allows the quotation marks for your quote to actually be in your string. Does that make sense? Kind of like the doc strings are special. This is a special way to make sure you get to actually use the quotation marks. Now, if you do this code the way it is, you can take this quote, all the lowercase letters, all the uppercase letters, and you can count the number of E's in that quote and the total number of characters. So for a character in P, if a character is in lows or a character is in ups, for uppercase, then it's going to do this stuff, right? Then you can calculate the percentage of E's, and you can print out the totals. This one over here that I did for you actually allows you to get a phrase from your user instead of using the direct quote. Right? More useful this way. It's going to force the phrase to be lowercase letters, where you don't have to worry about having uppercase and lowercase lists to check by. Remember we did that? One of the things you could have done in the project to make sure that you were getting. We're gonna make the letter we're looking for also be lowercase, so it matches. So we're gonna ask our user to give us the phrase and the letter we're looking for. We're still going to count the letters, and oddly enough, in lists they have a count function, so you don't actually have to do that with a variable in the loop. You could just do counts with the list you're trying to count from. And you can find out the total number of characters by doing the length of the phrase. Again, I don't have to use a loop to do that. I'm big about not using extra code if there's already a function for it. So basically what I did is everything in the original directions that had a function, I rewrote it with the function rather than you having to do all the extra variables and stuff. Does that make sense? Am I lost anybody? You good? No, you're chewing on your thumb, so I'm just checking. Okay. That's a nervous habit. So. All right. I do it all the time. So anyway, that's not a touchscreen anymore. So basically, this short amount of code here does all of this plus some. So I condensed or refactored step 1 into this. So that takes care of all of part 1 for you. So all we have to do to finish this lab is part 2, right? Okay. All right. So if we're going to do part 2, we have to do some printouts, and we're going to remove punctuation, right? So, well, first thing I want to do, because, you know, somebody gave me this code. Okay, I gave me this code, but I gave you the code. The first thing you probably should do with the starter file is rename it and save it as your name, Lab 7. The second thing you should do is run it and make sure that I didn't give you code that has errors in it. Because I would never do that intentionally, but it does happen. So let's run it and see if it works. And it does. Right now, it has a phrase hard-coded into it and a letter hard-coded into it. You can make those input statements and ask for a phrase and a letter. And it may ask you to do that in the lab. I don't remember. So let's find out. Yep. So right here, by looking at the example output, I can tell that I'm supposed to ask the user for a phrase, right? So I'm going to write a function that does the following based on the function. Based on what the function does, choose an appropriate function name. See, I'm taking the training wheels off. I'm making you name your own functions now.
Do you want to do 2 separate ones that ask what is the phrase? Because it also tells you that this is part 1, but it asks you to do it and then ask for part 2. So like, you want us to do 2?
Okay, let's back up to the end of part 1. So no, I want you to do this and I should have said I've done most of part one. I'm sorry. I've done the refactoring at D.
Yeah, like I.
You need to do E. We need to start at E. We need to create a function that asks for that information.
I
I'm
do
wrong.
that, I just need to know how you want to go about part two with that.
So, yeah, we need a function real quick to ask for the information. I'm gonna call it. Did it give a name? No. I'm just gonna call it user input. Right? And you can reword those any way you want to, but we need the user to give us a letter and a phrase, right? And then now we can get rid of all this stuff and just call. Now, what did I tell you about functions? What can they return? Only because of directions told you to.
Okay.
This is your third one about reading the book.
All right, so he asked a very valid question. He said, is there a reason we're creating a function to do this instead of just putting this in the main? And honestly, you could put it in the main. Nothing inherently wrong with putting the input statements in main. This is just us forcing you by direction to create more functions. And the reason this one's going to be weird is because if you remember, functions only return one piece of data, right? So I can't return phrase and letter. So that means that I'm going to have to call my count letters function inside of the user input function. So basically, I'm daisy chaining a bunch of functions together. Is it necessarily clean, pretty code this way? No, but it's trying to teach you that functions can call other functions. Does that make sense? So we're going to call user input here. And because this only can return one thing, now I'm going to move this into this function. And theoretically, when I press run, it should still work.
Boring.
Yes, it's boring. All right. So it works, right? So what's the learning lesson in this lab? It's teaching you how to use functions with inside of functions and still not having too much in a function. So the user input is driving this train at this point. Just like draw bus was driving the train where we were drawing bus. Could you have done all draw bus in main? Absolutely, except I told you not to in the directions. Those of you that are going to take CS1, please, if you don't learn anything else from this class, learn that you have to read the directions very, very, very closely, because it's all about following the directions for CS1. CS1, they're gonna get you if you don't follow directions. Not inferred. The directions are really not much different than what you're seeing on these. But I'm a little less judgmental when I'm grading if you went off on a tangent.
Hey, I'm not sure you.
And there's a lot more file structure in CS1. And they put things in packages, and then the packages have their own files in them. And almost every one of your, I know for the projects, probably your labs, you're gonna have more than one file you're working in. So Java breaks everything down into units based on files.
I think my chair has a bunch.
You're so weird. All right, so this takes care of
I
E.
have a question. Not, we still have to be going through that the instructions haven't always said anything.
Yes, it's assumed at this point you're doing doc strings.
Okay.
You don't have to worry about them in the labs, but in the assignments, yes.
Oh,
Because the labs, I honestly run them, and as long as yours runs, you get full credit for it. If you lost points on a lab, it's because something didn't run. And if you think I made a mistake, email me, because it's really easy for me to get off a line on spreadsheets. I've only done that twice so far this semester, but legitimately they had a legitimate question. So if you think I risk graded something, you're not gonna hurt my feelings by sending me an email and say, could you check that again? I don't agree. So F wants you to introduce a main function. I already have a main function. The last line is call to the main. And if you scroll down far enough on here, it's main.
do you want that at the end now? Because it's been at the end.
It's the person I got this lab from puts their mains at the end. I put mine at the top. Doesn't matter either way where they're at. In Python, it's a personal preference.
What is it in?
In Java, main's usually in a different file all by itself.
This is
Not,
gonna be
it may not be
fun.
completely by itself, but it's generally in a driver file or a controller file. You're gonna have like I said, you're gonna have a whole lot more file structure in Java than you have here. Yes, ma'am. Scroll. All of that I haven't changed any of this, so it should have been in the file if you downloaded the starter file. Yeah, okay. Yeah. So the next thing it wants us to do now is start part 2. So now we're at part 2.
Yeah.
So we're gonna do something different. We're gonna do word fun. Woohoo, word fun.
I love word games. You like word games? I like word.
Fun word.
Wordle is, yeah, it
What-
bothers me.
I do. I play word games a lot. I play Wordle a lot.
It was fun for like the first 3 months I played it, and then after that I was like, hey mom, I'm still on my first stage. Really?
On my rookie stage.
Oh, girl, out of it.
Wordle is fun until it gives me a word that has letters that repeat in it. And then I get angry.
Yeah.
Daddy nearly killed me.
I like
3
word
gigs in
games.
it.
And word at one
I
time.
like word games.
So I renamed it, so.
All right, what? So we're gonna do word fun. We're going to prompt the user for a phrase. We're gonna display the following about the phrase, the length of the phrase, lowercase version, the uppercase version, and the phrase without any punctuation. So basically it's just another function that's gonna display different things, right?
Oh.
It tells you to name it appropriately, right?
There's only so many.
You know, the part 2 is called word fun. I probably name it word fun. Because it tells you what we're doing. We're doing part 2, right? So you can name it whatever you want to, but that's what I'm going with. And it's gonna prompt the user for a phrase again, right? So I'm just gonna copy this line of code. And then it's just gonna display a bunch of things about the phrase, right? And it's gonna remove the punctuation. Well, the hard part is removing the punctuation, because we already talked about, and if you scroll back up in the code that I gave you, how to get the length of the phrase, how to get a lowercase version of the phrase, and how to get an uppercase version of the phrase, right? Only one line of that, those 3 things have not been written in code previous for you, the uppercase one. But I bet if you look at lower, you can figure out what upper is. Maybe not. I don't know. So oddly enough, I'm going to need this again. So I'm going to go copy it and paste it. And why am I asking the user again for the phrase? Because it's a different phrase. It's not going to be the same phrase that we used in the other one. We want a different phrase. So this is one case where you would repeat lines of code because you're not doing the same phrase. If it's clearer to you, you can give it a different name. You don't have to call it, you can call it phrase 1 and phrase 2 on your variables, but the computer doesn't care because they're in different functions, so you can use the same variable name. All right, so I can get it to lowercase. And guess what? I'm gonna change the name because I gotta print it separately and do the phrase to now, if I left it phrase, I would have copied over my lowercase, which would have been okay as long as you did the printing first. But I want to be able to keep both versions of it, so I might use it later. So I'm gonna give the uppercase one a different variable name where I have it in lowercase and I have it in uppercase, and now I can do whatever I want to it. You could just name it lower and upper if that's more clear to you. Let's do that. That'll make it. So you absolutely could do that. And that actually is much clearer if you ever have to come back to this code, what you've done, right? If you want them longer variable names, just phrase, lower underscore phrase, that's fine. You can make your variable names as long as you want to, as long as you use the underscore to separate your words. I don't, because I misspelled too many things. So the shorter the variable name, the less likely I am to have a typo in it. So if I do this, I've converted it to lower and upper. I can find out how long it is by right? Again, I got that from the code that I gave you earlier. I guess I could call it total characters too if I wanted to, but this one actually says link in the description. So, and then the phrase without punctuation. Okay, well that's a little harder. So it actually, if you scroll down, gives you the function you need to remove punctuation. Now, if you want to remove the punctuation, you have to go through and do it one character at a time and make sure it's not one of the punctuation characters, right? So if I copy and paste this, it doesn't really matter where you copy it into your code, but I'm gonna put it right there. I now can do and you know, I didn't write this code because I can't spell punctuation. Now, notice it says import string. In the past, we haven't had to import the string because we were just using pretty standard functions, right? This one has some other stuff in it. So I'm going to go up here at the top because I like import statements at the very top. And I'm going to paste that in there. Now let's run this. Well, no, I'm not ready to run it yet. Yeah, I am. Let's run it and, oh, I didn't put, never mind, I'm not ready to run it. I didn't put my print statements in. Yeah, I'm shortening up the prompts. Now, theoretically, this should work, except we haven't called word fun. So, enter a phrase.
Oh. Yeah. Oh my God, you spelled my name so wrong.
I'm sorry, it just worked.
It's so long.
You know I can't spell.
Great. Oh, okay.
I
That's
can't
okay.
spell.
You sounded it out. Better than I've gotten.
I spelled it phonetically. How about that?
I've gotten K-E-Y. A-N-A.
It
That's how
happens.
my friends spelled it.
So pick a letter. Let's go with I. So there's 23 letters. Okay, so we're gonna enter a new phrase with punctuation this time. Right?
Oh, you kept the other. Okay, do you want us to keep the other call?
How will I know if you did it right? You don't keep the other part.
Well, no, it's there. I just didn't call for it.
Again, how will I know if I'm just running it if you don't leave it in
But
there?
isn't it just gonna repeat that over?
So, does that make sense? Look, I have created passwords for things like this password is way stupid because I needed lots of characters. I don't like those really long passwords.
People that do that.
I don't need a passphrase. I just need to be able to get login. So does it make sense what we did? Now, why does this function work for the punctuation? Because it's looking for a letter in phrase. Well, no, yeah. If letter is not in string dot punctuation, punctuation is predefined in the string class, which is why we imported it. And it has all the characters that would be in punctuation. If you try to create that yourself, you might miss one because what English punctuation is and a different language punctuation, you know, you don't rely on your own memory to remember what punctuation is. So that, if I'm not mistaken, gets us through part 2. Part 3 is processing a list. We're going to have a list of grades, and you're going to give me the maximum grade, the minimum grade, and the average grade. Right? All right, let's write this real quick. So we're going to create a function called calculate average that will calculate and return the average of a list of numbers. This function will take one parameter, which is the list. We're going to, on step 2, create a new function called enter student grades that does the following. It prompts the user for the number of students' grades to enter. It's going to create an empty list. It's going to iterate through that list. It's going to use a loop. I'm going to use words I can actually say instead of. It's going to take the number of grades you gave, and it's going to make the list run, the loop run that many times. It's going to ask the user to enter that many grades. So if I say I'm putting 5 grades in, then the loop's going to run 5 times. Right? After it gets the grades and puts them into the list, it's going to display the list of grades, the maximum grade, the minimum grade, and the average grade. So while these directions were written for part 3, with it telling you to create a calculate function in step 1, and then step 2 is enter grades, you really can't test the calculate one until you've written the enter grade ones, right? So this is not do them in this order kind of thing. This is, you're going to accomplish all these tasks, but you may have to do them in a different order. Me personally, I probably would go ahead and start with part 2 and get it doing the printing, the minimum, the maximum, and the list of grades, because I'm going to have to call calculate average in that function. Then I'll go write calculate average and come back. You can do it in whatever order you want to. You just can't test calculate average easily until you've done enter grades. Does that make sense? So I'm going to go ahead and start with enter grades.
Where?
So I'm going to get the number of grades. So I'm going to ask the user how many grades they want to enter. I'm then going to set up an empty list. And you set up an empty list by just using the square brackets with nothing between them. That makes grades hold a list, but we don't know what's in it yet, right? Then I'm going to set up a for loop for num for I in range. And what's our range going to be? Num grades. Now I'm going to, again, I need to get a single grade. So I'm going to ask them to enter grade, whatever number my loop's on, remember, right? And then I'm going to put a colon and a space there where it looks pretty when they go to print it out. So every time through the loop is going to ask for a grade. I'm then going to put that grade into grades. Right? Now I can use the append function, or I can just add it to it, right? Remember for our notes on Monday, that there was 2 ways you put something into a list? Right? So I could do grades dot append, and it should put it in there. And put it at the end of the list, because we're not sorting this list, we just need a list of grades. You can go back and look up how to do it with a plus sign too, if that's easier for you. Now, notice I used singular for one grade and plural for the list. That's pretty common in list terminology, nomenclature, whatever you want to say. To have, when you're talking about one element of the list, to be a singular name and the list itself to be the plural. Yeah.
I keep getting like some kind of attribute error type or some kind of type none. And whenever I try to print it out, it just says none. I don't know what's going on here.
Well, me either. I'll have to come look at your code in a minute. All right. So that should get us through this prompt, appending it to the list of grades, and then the grades are entered to display the following, the list of grades. So I'm going to get out of my loop. And just for testing purposes, I'm going to print grades. Right? So let's put this into our main and test it. And to save us a little time, we'll comment these 2 out. So I want to enter 3. Okay, so that's on me. Num grades has to be converted to an integer. And since we're going to do math on these down here, we might as well go ahead and make grade into integers too, right? Because we are going to do the average on that list later, right? So I enter 3. So yeah, 98, 56. Why is a pen not working? Okay, fine. You don't want to do a pen? We'll do a pen. I so like Java better.
Yep. That's the type of stuff that I would
I so like Java better.
Do you have to import something to them?
I don't think so, but we can try that. Nope. I so dislike Python some days.
I got it to work.
How'd you get it to work?
Just remove the grades equals grades of him.
Oh, okay, right. Yep. See, I like Java better. Also, if you're adding it, you need, using the plus sign, you need the brackets around it. Show it's a list element.
Okay.
Java does not do that to you. So I could just do this and it works. Right? So append does the same thing, except you don't have to set it equal to the list because you're already working on the list. So just to prove it works, we'll go do that too. So I could do it that way, or I could do, I'm going back to teaching Java. I don't forget Java. Ooh, that's a big grade. Well, their average is bad. All right, so this just proves that once you learn too many programming languages, you don't remember all the subtle differences between them.
Yeah.
Hey, you can just
So
do it.
append works, but you don't need to set it equal to the variable. It just adds it to the list. And the plus equals works as long as you put the square brackets around whatever you're adding to indicate that it's a list element. This is not a problem in strongly typed languages because you would have already told it what type everything was. Does that make sense? Okay. So we've gotten that far and we've printed grades. Right? And then we needed another print statement. And you very simply, never seen you do that before. You very simply in here can just go let's make sure I've got the right command and I'm not using Java once again. So doing that correctly. Actually, I'm not doing that correctly. So like length, min and max are predefined things that we'll go and find those. I left a parentheses off there. So now if I run it, I should get 3 out of 4 of the things I need. Right? Now I just need that. Now I need to go write the calculate average function. Right? So I'm going to start off with a variable total with nothing in it. I'm going to have a, what we call a for each loop in Java. Some will call it that in this for each loop, where it's going to, for each grade in the list of grades is going to do something. So we're going to add total plus the grade each time to get the total. And then I'm going to return the total divided by the length of the grades. You absolutely can do that all in one line, or you can do it on separate lines. No, because num grades doesn't exist in this function. So she asked a very good question. She said, can we use num grades? No, because num grades is a variable that only exists inside of the function enter student grades. There's not a variable called num grades in here. Now you could create it. You could go take this whole line of code. You could come in here and create a num grades, but it would still be the length of the list. Yeah.
Couldn't we, instead of iterating through grade states, just do like some grades? Sorry.
Yes, but that's not what I'm teaching right
Okay. So you want us to do that? Sorry.
now. So does this make sense? I've showed you how to iterate through a list multiple different ways, right? Showed you how to create a list. I showed you how to iterate through it. Now let's pull it all together. So now I need up here to print out the average. Boy, it's gonna be a long day. And I'm gonna just call calculate. And when I run it, let's try 4 grades just to prove that it's. Yes? We're all happy? Yours messed up.
How do you? So isn't it like turn it to float to make it not be like a I did different numbers than you, so my thing is like 75 with different.
No, that has nothing to do with it. Float's gonna return the same number of significant digits every time. You gotta do a print format thing to get it to be 1 or 2 decimal places, and I'm not requiring that, so just turn it in. Yes, I'm gonna go back to the code real quick. Scroll up, scroll down, what?
There it is.
Alright. So, if I'm not mistaken, that should end all of lab 7. Now, before you turn it in to me, you need to uncomment the 2 lines in the main that I commented, because I need to see that all 3 pieces work when I run it. A lot of you are doing this. I am finding that a lot of people are turning in stuff and it does not run. It gives me a red error. Or you commented out big sections of it for testing purposes, which is perfectly fine for testing, but it's not so good for turning in. I've been pretty lenient and I've still been grading things. I have stopped doing that. If I get a big red error, I'm not grading it anymore. If you can't test your code and it at least partially run by the time you turn it into me, then you should have been in class asking me questions. Or you should have been emailing me, asking me questions. You should not be turning in code that runs nothing. We're almost to the end of the semester. Right? Right? Everybody agree that you heard me? Thank you. All right. So, I'm going to start grading these projects over the weekend. If you turned in your project and it does nothing, you left it just on a red error run state, you might want to go resubmit it and comment out whatever broke it today. Because I'm going to download them before I leave the state tomorrow. Because I'm going to grade while I'm out of state. It's good use of my time, right? While I'm sitting in the car, I'm going to run code.
Don't we have
Print statement. That's like lab 7.
I don't care if you put the print statement that it's, you did it or not, as long as you named your file correctly. All right, question.
Issue.
You have an issue. Okay, I can look at yours. You have a question. All right, I'm going to stop the recording here. I was going to try to get started on assignment 7, but I'd rather answer questions than start the assignment. If you would do me a kind favor and everybody actually start the assignment, you know, the next couple of days, where you can send me an email where I can help you before it's due on Tuesday, I will answer email periodically throughout the weekend also. Because I'm going to be trapped at my in-laws' house, so it gives me something to do. Right?